Devil worship in France. The discovery of M. Ricoux. It's chapter 5. And the full title is Devil Worship in France, or the Question of Lucifer, a record of things seen and heard in the secret societies according to the evidence of initiates. A.E.Waite, or A.E.Waite, 1896 is when this book. By the year 1891, Masonic revelations in Paris have become too numerous for one more or less to fix by the volatile quality of public interest unless a new horror were attached to it, passwords and signs and catechisms, all the purposes and the better half of the secrets, everyone outside the fraternity who concerned themselves with masonry and cared for theoretical initiation knew these, or was satisfied by the belief that they did. The literature of anti-masonry became a drug in the market, failing some novelty and revelation. The last work of Leo Taxil was eminently a contribution towards this missing quantity. He was already, in a certain sense, the discoverer of female Freemasonry. That is to say, he was the only equipped person who seriously maintained that the exploded androgyne system was worked in modern France, and when he added the development of the Palladium as the climax to the mysteries, as a climax to the mystery of iniquity, it is small wonder that his book achieved notoriety to the extent of 5,000 copies. He was assailed as a venal pamphleteer, and his past achievements in literature were freely disinterred for his own benefit and for public instruction, but he was more than compensated by the approbation of MGR, is that manager? Fava, Bishop of Grenoble, with whose opinions upon Satanism and Masonry we have previously made acquaintance. The Church indeed had all around agreed to overlook Leo Taxil's early enormities. She forgot that she had attempted to prosecute him and to fine him a round sum of 60,000 francs. The Supreme Pontiff forgave him the accusation of poisoning and transmitted his apostolical benediction. He was complimented by the Cardinal Vicar of Rome, and he is in the proud position of a man who has received felicitations and high approvals from 18 ecclesiastical dignitaries, whether cardinal, archbishops, or bishops, with his back against the Turris Fortunatus. With his back against the Turris Fortitudinis. He faces accusers stoutly and returned them blow for blow, nor did he lack his lay defenders, one of whom, by the mode which he adopted, became himself, somewhat unexpectedly, a witness of Lucifer. And something interesting that if you look in the Islamic world, one of the things that happened is if they found out you made your living as a storyteller, your credit as a narrator got kicked down a notch to the point that if they thought you were a dishonest storyteller, no matter how widespread your teachings were, people would just forget your collections and stuff because they wanted to make sure, that the most authentic narrations about Prophet Muhammad ibn Abdullah were passed on. So why they tolerate, this guy likes to make up and try to draw out, but people tolerate it with news people and whatnot nowadays. You find out that someone's trying to stir up, oh, there's got to be a conspiracy in there somewhere, or these outsiders got to be evil. It's like, once you find out somebody is going into it with that intention, at the very least, even making up, especially once you find out they're making up things. I don't, what's wrong with people and their historicity claims. To those who disbelieve in the existence of female Freemasonry, Leo Taxil had offered 2 pieces of wise advice. Go to the Bibliothèque Nationale, search the files of Masonic organ La Chaîne de Union, and you will find proof positive of your mistake. Next, proceed to the Mason T. There is no need to reproduce the address, but it is given by Leo Taxil in full, and obtain their current price, list of lodge furniture, insignia, and other accessories, and you will find particulars of aprons for sisters, diplomas for sisters, garters for sisters, jewels for sisters, except upon the signs of initiation. The catalog is not surrendered, but in view of the literature of Revelation, the signs are no longer secret. All this is clearly outside the subject of Satanism, but it leads up, notwithstanding, to the discovery of M. Ricoux. I don't think you pronounce the X at the end of that. As to the gentleman himself, there are no particulars forthcoming. He has promised an account of his adventure during 4 years as an emigrant in Chile, and he has promised a patriotic epic in 12 cantos, but so far as my information goes, they remain in the womb of time. But he has a claim on our consideration because it occurred to him that he would put in practice the advice of Leo Taxil, which he did accordingly in the autumn of 1891, and demonstrated his own satisfaction that Are There Women in Freemasonry is a book of true disclosure, and a question that must be answered in the affirmative. Wait, so is it one of those books by, it's patriotic, it's like, I visited this country, and I spent years, and the whole time, every single adventure I ever had, I realized the superiority of my own country. I mean, not really my taste of book, but his claim on our consideration because it occurred to him that he put in practice the advice of Leo Taxil, which he did accordingly in the autumn of 1891, and demonstrated to his own satisfaction that Are There Women in Freemasonry is a book of true disclosure, and a question that must be answered in the affirmative. He performed thereupon a very creditable action. He wrote a pamphlet entitled The Existence of Lodges for Women, Researches on this Subject, in which he stated the result of his investigation, collected the controversy on the subject which had been scattered through the press of the period, and defended Leo Taxil with the warmth of an alter ego. But he had not limited his researches to the directions indicated in his author. Encouraged by the success which he had attained in his initial efforts, he determined upon an independent experiment in bribery, and after the same manner that Leo Taxil produced the ritual of the new and reformed Palladium, So he succeeded in obtaining this collection of secret instructions to the Supreme Councils, Grand Lodges, and Grand Orients, printed at Charleston in the year 1891. This collection, he tells us, is certainly a document of the first order, for it emanates from General Albert Pike, that is to say, from the Pope of the Freemasons. On this, well, Freemasons don't consider their leaders infallible or some ridiculous thing like that, except when they refer to the grand architect of God, sovereign, omnipresent, mighty. I don't know. They have a phrase. I don't know. On this document, he bases the following statements: Universal Freemasonry possesses a supreme directory as the apex of its international organization, and is located at Berlin. 4 subsidiary central directories exist in Naples, Calcutta, Washington, and Mount Video. Furthermore, a chief of political action resides at Rome, commissioned to watch over the Vatican and to precipitate events against the papacy. A grand depository of sacred traditions under the title of Sovereign Pontiff of Universal Freemasonry is located at Charleston, and at the time of discovery was Albert Pike. Some of these statements, it will be observed, require rectification in the light of fuller disclosures made by Palladian initiates, from whom the material of my second chapter has been chiefly derived, but it will be seen that it's substantially correct. M. Ricoux further states that Albert Pike reformed the ancient Palladian rite and imparted thereto the Luciferian character in all its brutality. Now, sometimes enlightening can be brutal, but it's not needlessly, isn't it the regular society? Come on. It's the regular society that is excessively violent, not the secret societies, for the most part. Now, I guess there are parties where people get killed or something like that, so that's different. But that's not the Freemasons or the Illuminati or anything like that. This is, even the Queen, even the royal family in England apparently practiced ritual cannibalism, but not that much. But it's like Palladism for him is a selection. He surrenders to the ordinary lodges and adepts who confine themselves to materialism, or invoke the grand architect without daring to apply to him his true name, and under the title of the Knights Templars and Mistress Templars, he groups the fanatics who do not shrink from the direct patronage of Lucifer. The most serious mistake, and let me remind you again, Lucifer used to be a title the Christians called Jesus. The most serious mistake which has been made in the use of the materials is an unconscious attempt to read into the encyclicals of Albert Pike a proportion of Leo Taxil's material, for which the long citations given by M. Ricoux do not afford a warrant. What he really appears to have attained is the instructions of Pike as Supreme Commander, Grand Master of the Supreme Council of the Mother Lodge of Ancient and Accepted Scottish Rite of Charleston and the 23rd Supreme Confederated Councils of the Globe, and the Scottish Rite is by the hypothesis apart from the Palladium. In other respects, the information comes to much the same thing. The long document which the pamphlet prints and extenso exhibits Albert Pike preaching Pilatism in the full foulness of its doctrine and practice, the resolution of the problem of the flesh by indiscriminate satisfaction of the passions, the multiplication of androgyne lodges for this purpose, the dual nature of the divine principle, and the cultus of Lucifer as the good God. The most curious feature of the performance is, here again, it is from end to end a travesty of Eliphas Levi, slice after slice, from his chief writings combined with interlineal additions, which give them a sense diametrically opposed to that of the great Magus. See, we're getting, all these claims here are piecemeal, and, let's take this here and this here and this here, and, let's add stuff in that we don't know. Or maybe we do know that that's not part of it, but we're going to say it anyways. Seize them and kill them wherever you find them, and when the sacred months are over, the misassociate. It's like, okay, read the context of things. Thank you very much. Or particularly don't add things like some of the things I saw just flipping through the channels. Christian preachers, there's a Quran verse about attacking the eagle, and it's like, no, there's not. Now it is impossible that two persons working independently for the production of bogus documents should both borrow from the same source. Hence Leo Taxil and M. Ricoux, if they have been guilty of imposition, must certainly have collaborated. It is unreasonable, however, to advance such an accusation in the absence of any evidence, and if we accept the contribution of M. Ricoux as made in perfect faith, we must acknowledge that it exonerates Leo Taxil from the possible suspicion of himself abducting Levi, and then the existence of a theurgic society based on Manichaean principles instituted by Albert Pike and possessing a magical ritual taken in part from Levi, was a more serious aspect than when it rested on the unsupported assurance of one witness. The discovery of M. Ricoux is obviously the first importance, and it is certainly to be regretted that he has not substantiated it by depositing the collection of instructions in the National Library, supposing it to be in his possession, or by photographing, instead of transcribing, supposing he was pledged to its return. And perhaps I'll do another one, but let's think about some of what we saw. Right, one witness. If you turn to the New Testament, the reliability of the account, it's not just a collection derived and translated and passed on. It's one person put something in a margin, and it's like, let's add that. So there's 10,000 variations in the Greek, and you start off. See, John started out as 19 chapters. Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, they all started out as 19 chapters. Even the letters of Paul have changes that went on as it went on, but particularly the so-called canonical, the so-called Gospels. They were written. The Gospel of John was apparently written first in the 90s, and then the others were written over the next 60 years. And by 150, you had the books of the Bible, and pretty soon in that by 160, you had people saying, the current books that we have listed for the so-called New Testament, that's what they are. And the Jews already have their book, so let's add their book. There were already people saying that. But you find stuff in both sides, the gospel and the stuff about Paul and his buddies. The book of Revelations is actually a rewrite from a Essene book, as it could be called. And there's the Aramaic version of that exists. It was actually by one of the people you would call Jesus, Judah Barabbas Benuda, Barabbas being the Greek nickname. So single witnesses are valuable enough, but really we're going to take We don't know we don't know really who they are. Who's this Matthew? It's obvious Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John aren't people who knew Jesus, and they're very apparent about that. It's, second or third generation accounts that they're all looking at everything that's being said, and they're throwing in their own interpretations. If you look at the actual sayings of Jesus, so a Luciferian could take out and say, "Oh, well, the Bible's full of formulas and it's full of a lot of this stuff." And if we're talking about, a ribbon, it's interesting. But I think part of the problem with the claims about other faiths comes directly from, well, what strength was required for a biblical claim? And I'm not saying that it's not mostly true, and that it's not better than certain other accounts, but better and flawed is still, like I pointed out in my talking about fundamentalism and what the what's that Pharaohs and Kings book that I just read and talked about. There's some thoughts in my head that I don't think were in the thing, but yeah, fundamentalism is different. Fundamentalism is you look into the sources. Luciferianism can be fundamentalism because you can look into the sources yourself and make your own conclusions. Not in a liberal way of, liberalism isn't beliefs, it's your approach. People say, oh, Luciferianism is liberalism. It's like, not necessarily. When you find what seems to be truth and good, and you bring out that light, you don't criticize what's per se, well, I mean, if it's wrong, ignorance, you leave the ignorance aside, and you bring out your own thing. You don't pick and choose. I'm not gonna. Oh, my own personal taste. When it's what you need to bring out, you bring it out and you shine. The sign of the sign of light, or the other sign of light, or the other sign of light.